Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fashion in Transit. My name is Denise Green, and I'm the director of the Cornell Fashion and Textile Collection and an associate professor in the Department of Fiber Science and Apparel Design. We're broadcasting to you live today from Cornell University, which is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayakono, the Cayuga Nation, who are part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, who have both historic and ongoing presence to these lands and waters to which we honor. So we want to begin with that acknowledgement and, of course, to welcome all of you to this event today. We're so excited to share this exhibition with you, something that we've worked very hard on despite the many challenges that the pandemic has brought into our lives. The pandemic, of course, has changed dramatically the way that we do transport ourselves. And so this has been an interesting aspect of curating this exhibition. And so I'll take you a little bit through the timeline before introducing you to our student curators. And as always, for all of my talks, I try to dress up in a thematic outfit. And I'm really pleased today that my dear friend Marie Sirakos let me borrow her 1970s Pan Am tarmac air hostess jacket, and it was designed by the famed Hollywood designer Edith Head. So I just thought I'd share with you all an artifact from personal wardrobe, not the collection, but thematic. So let's go into the Cornell Fashion Collection. Again, this space, this is part of our display space in the Human Ecology building, and this is a building that we share with our colleagues across the college and the university. And in the College of Human Ecology, we have a number of different programs, including a program in policy analysis and management. And I have a colleague, professor in that department who walks by our cases all the time, and we got to talking a few years back, his interest being in transportation infrastructure and my interest being in fashion, about how we could bring our respective interests together. The two exhibits that you're seeing on display here in this slide are from 2016 and 2017. One was a collaboration with the Kiel Center in the ILR School, and the other was a collaboration with the Wharton Studio Museum, which is dedicated to silent film. And so we have, in the spirit of the Cornell Fashion and Textile Collection, a desire to collaborate with colleagues across the university. Rick wasn't able to be here live with us today, but he has included a video recording of his introduction. And so I'm going to hand it over to Rick to share a little bit about himself and his contributions to this exhibit.
Hello, this is Rick Geddes speaking. I'm a professor in the Department of Policy Analysis and Management, or PAM, within the College of Human Ecology at Cornell University. I'm also founding director of the Cornell Program in Infrastructure Policy, or CPIP, to further the study of infrastructure policy, teaching, and public engagement at Cornell University. And I've known Professor Denise Green for many years. And we've talked about our common interests in doing something that combines her research interests in fashion and design and my interests in infrastructure policy. Fashions over time have been greatly influenced by the technology of transportation. For example, women's skirts were impractical when transit came into heavy use, urban transit, buses, subways, etc., and were modified. Men's uniforms for postal services and working on the railroads were also affected. Postal services had a huge effect. UPS, United Parcel Service, uniforms were very formal over time, and those have been affected by transportation infrastructure. Aviation, of course, steward and stewardess uniforms, pilots, etc., have been greatly affected by the ubiquity of a highly developed transportation network. And of course, with new materials over time, as the exhibit shows, people doing recreational activities, roller skating, inline blading, parachuting, etc., have all been greatly affected by technology with regard to transportation infrastructure, both for fun and for travel. So the movement of both freight and people across time and space has greatly affected fashion, also influenced by it. And I think if you take a look at this exhibit, you will see that displayed in a very clear and sort of amazing way, over a long period of time. So we're very excited about this exhibit. We're very excited that we were able to make this happen. Denise and her students have been tremendous in working through this, particularly during the time of COVID. So please take a look, and I think it's something you'll be very impressed by, and it's something we're very proud of. Thank you very much.
So, as you heard from Rick, we came together to think about both the ways that fashion enables the body to move through space, but also the fashions of transportation workers. So these were some of the pieces that we were brainstorming about early on. Again, unexpected, of course, the pandemic. And so the pieces that we had hoped to borrow from the Smithsonian weren't possible in this context. And the piece in the middle is actually an early motoring duster. That's part of our collection. Didn't make the cut for the exhibition, but these were some of the pieces that Rick and I had brainstormed about including. And we began to think about who else we could enroll into this project. The Cornell Council for the Arts announced their 2020 biennial, which was the theme Swarm. And so we began to think about the swarm of bodies across the world and the way fashion, again, enabled that and has been influenced by the transit swarm. And so I reached out to my colleague, Leah Sweet, who is the Lynch curatorial coordinator at the Herbert F. Johnson Museum of Art. She is a phenomenal museum educator and an art historian. You'll hear from her later today. She's an alum from the graduate program in the history of art at Williams College and the doctoral program in art history at the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU. And she came to us at Cornell from Parsons, where she was an assistant professor of art history. And in her role at the Johnson, Leah pairs with faculty to support object-based interdisciplinary teaching and to create installations, programs, and interpretation. And so with Leah on board, we thought we can make this exhibit multi-sited. So you actually have to physically transport yourself from one site to another to visit the exhibition. And so we thought that would kind of bring the exhibition theme to bear on the embodied experience of the exhibit. Of course, these conversations, as Leah will share, began in before pre-pandemic times. And so of course we've pivoted, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. Part of that pivot was the CCA biennial grant that we applied for and received was to make the exhibition the final project of this course, which I taught last fall as part of the Society for the Humanities fabrication theme. The course was called Curating Fashion Exhibitions, and the idea was the class would collaborate collectively on an exhibit, and this would be the culminating physical exhibit of the semester. Of course, the semester did not end in person. It was designed to end online, and so I had to sort of reframe my syllabus, and the students actually curated a physical installation at the beginning of the semester when they were in person, and then at the end of the semester broke into small groups to curate digital exhibitions virtually. And so the small group that curated Fashion in Transit committed to staying on the next semester and seeing it through to a physical installation, which we'll talk to you about today. And so I'm really pleased to introduce four students who are part of my class and are the curators on this exhibit. Mona Mayher, she's a PhD student in apparel design at Cornell University. You can see her contributions to the project. She did amazing work securing copyright and administrative tasks. She was entirely remote, and so it was really wonderful to be able to rely on her for her expertise in website design and correspondence. Kat Roberts is also a PhD student in apparel design at Cornell. She's been working on-site, installation, photography, conservation, really boots on the ground, as with Joshua Johnson, who is an undergraduate student, the only undergrad on the team, and a phenomenal one at that. He's double majoring in Africana Studies and Classics, and he did incredible work with the research for many of the pieces, securing acquisitions, and helping with the installation. And Christine Mcdonald is an MFA candidate in arts, architecture, and planning at Cornell, and she also was very integral in helping us to acquire artifacts for the exhibition and put together the amazing show that we'll be talking with you about today. So I just thought I'd show you the Human Ecology building. This is the first site of our exhibition, and this is a photo of what can be seen from the opposite of the case that you see on the right. So exact opposite that case almost is a big window where there was a giant pile of snow being piled up. And so thinking about the different kinds of climates and conditions, this inspired us to think first, make that first case about winter weather. And as the students will explain, for the fashion component of the exhibition, which takes place in the Human Ecology building, the exhibit is organized by different movements, different verbs. So this first section that Christine will introduce is about sliding. How does fashion enable the body to slide on the surface? We also have swimming, riding, rolling, walking, flying, and carrying that all occur in the exhibit cases in the Human Ecology building. I'm going to turn it over to Christine, but I also wanted to mention that you're welcome to use the chat function. If you have any questions, we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but you're welcome to write your questions in the chat on the upper right, I believe is where you'll find the icon, and we'll look at those questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Christine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christine. So sliding relies on low physical friction between surfaces, which allow for material bodily contact to create a smooth gliding movement. So sledding, skiing, sleigh riding, and ice skating are all forms of sliding transportation that rely upon frozen water in the form of ice or snow. Cold outdoor temperatures require warm clothes for winter activities, like the sleigh gloves and snowsuits found in this case. Indoor skating, while still chilly, offers more artistic possibilities for fashion, like the 1930s figure skating costume on display created by knitwear designer Mimi Pierce.
Hey everyone, I'm Kat. I'm going to be talking about this very pink figure skating costume. As Christine mentioned, it was created by Mimi Pierce in 1938, and as indicated by the garment's tag, you can see that it was hand knitted. In addition to the pink, this design was also brought to life with metallic silver yarn, which was used to create the undulating patterns seen in the bodice and tie closure at the neck. And while the top of the garment is extremely form-fitting, it's clear that the skirt was designed to maximize the skater's movement as she twirled. Although this dress is now over 80 years old, the fact that it remains in such excellent condition really speaks to the high quality of the work that Mimi Pierce was producing at this time.
So next we have these figure skates called Sonja Henie figure skates. And Sonja Henie was a young Norwegian woman who overtly popularized ice skating in the United States and revolutionized much of the sport throughout the world, with her career beginning in the early 1920s. She won 10 world championships and 3 consecutive gold medals in the Winter Olympics. At the time Henie was learning to skate, women were expected to wear traditional black leather skate boots and long wool skirts, but this did not allow for the body to perform spins and jumps safely. So Henie and her affluent family reworked the image of the female figure skater: white leather skate boots and knee-length skating gowns that opened up the air around the legs and feet. After the 1936 Olympics, she capitalized on her world fame in Hollywood productions, ice shows, and by licensing her name on products like these boots on display, which actually include her signature, a status symbol at the time.
The backdrop to this case includes a phenomenal photograph from the Division of Rare and Manuscripts collections. This is a photo some of you may recognize of Beebe Lake, and these are Cornell students and folks from the local community skating on Beebe Lake in the early 20th century. And we've also included in the exhibition a pair of skates. These are skates that would strap over your shoes, so very quickly you could get onto the ice. And what's interesting we learned in this process is that Cornell actually gave PE credit to students who would go and skate on the lake, you know, in the evening from 7 to 9. They would have monitors, and this would have been in the early part of the 20th century. So it was really fun to share some of the Cornell history as well. And as some of you may have heard, one of our Cornell students just placed 4th in the World Figure Skating Championships last week.
This beautiful red ski ensemble was a lot of fun to research. It was initially a bit of a mystery as it did not have any garment labels or manufacturing information, but it did have a handwritten tag with a number, fabric description, and cost. Ultimately, we were able to determine that this was never intended to be worn, but rather was made as a sample for commercial sewing pattern company Quick Sew. It's highly likely that this was created by the garment's donor, Cornell alumna and fashion historian Elizabeth Smith Brown, as she worked for a number of sewing pattern companies during her long career in the fashion industry. After doing some searching online, we were delighted to find the actual uncut pattern. We're able to include it in exhibition as well.
The next piece also has some interesting Cornell history. These are sleigh riding gloves, and these were, they were owned by George Warren. Warren Hall is named after him, and he created these gloves in the early 20th century. He brought them to a local tanner when the family's beloved dog passed away of natural causes. And so again, this is a time when people didn't waste things, and winters in upstate New York and where he was from originally in Nebraska, very, very cold, and fur of course is very warming. And so this was a way to, very sentimental, to remember the dog, but also to keep the hands warm while sleigh riding. And
this is the swimming case, and we were thinking about this as how humans displace their bodies in water for pleasure, physical activity, research, and travel. Humans are a bipedal species with lungs and thus not specifically adapted for aquatic life. But despite this, we have found technological and fashionable ways to submerge, float, and move ourselves through the water.
Hello everyone, I am Mona. Let's talk about the swim fins. Churchill designed and patented the Churchill swim fin in 1940 after seeing Tahitian boys using similar devices that created aquatic thrust and improving upon earlier design by Louis de Courlier. The fins were not initially a commercial success, but when boarding was introduced in 1971, the excellent performance of Churchill swim fin made them one of the best-selling swim fins in the world. Denise?
And so these swim fins were from the late 1940s. And so we also included a bathing suit from this time period, worn by Billie Jean Hennigan, who is pictured here in Los Angeles in August 1945. Billie Jean graduated from high school in June of 1941, of course, which was right before the US entrance into World War II. And with all attention turned to the war effort, she moved to California, which is where she'd been born. She lived with an aunt and was employed in a B-52 airplane factory. And she actually worked at the Central PBX telephone exchange. So when she worked on the switchboard, it meant that she was the first person in the factory to hear about momentous events in world news related to the war and other events like the death of FDR, VE Day, VJ Day. And then she would pass this information on to the workers. The photo of Billie Jean in this white two-piece bathing suit was taken shortly before she returned to New York after the end of the war. And what's interesting is, you know, in fashion history, people talk about the bikini sort of launches, it comes to be in 1946, named for Bikini Atoll, but this is actually a two-piece bathing suit that Billie Jean was wearing before the bikini receives its name. Next, we're going to go into the riding case. In swimming and sliding, we were talking about examples where the body did the work of propelling itself in some way forward, whereas with riding, it often involves sitting and moving simultaneously. The forward movement in riding is not usually created by the human body itself, but by another being, like a horse or a donkey or a mule or a sled dog, or technology that might combine one of these beings too, like a horse-drawn carriage, but also motorized cars, motorcycles, and then of course trains, buses, subways, and futuristic possibilities of automatic driving vehicles, hyperloop technologies of which Professor Rick Geddes has written about extensively. These new forms of transit offer a new horizon for shared travel. And independent travel. So riding, of course, can be both a shared experience with other travelers, and the garments in this case and the images featured convey different kinds of fashions that have emerged either in response to transportation itself or the infrastructure. So the first one related to infrastructure is a phenomenal image from the Kiel Center for Labor Management, Documentation, and Archives. This is an engine cleaning crew working on the Southern Pacific Railroad during World War II. too. And so this is a photograph that was taken at the Oakland Roundhouse. And so these women are the Rosie Riveters working to maintain transportation infrastructure and wearing, of course, denim. And what I love is if you see, go back, the woman sweeping, you can actually see she's got her hat on backwards. And so even these uniforms have been stylized in really interesting ways.
This is another piece that was graciously loaned to us by the Kiel Center. It's a denim jacket from the 1950s made by the US company Lee. As you can see in the images, it has been customized with numerous railroad patches. There's actually 88 in total. And one of the things that makes this piece so special is the care that was given to this garment by the owner. Not only does it remain in impeccable condition, but in the image on the right, you can see that so much thoughtfulness, intentionality went into the placement of each and every one of these patches.
The next piece is a riding habit worn by Gertrude Heimrimi. And you can see her in this photograph wearing a different habit than the one we have of hers on display. But I wanted to show you this close-up of a stock pin, which I think is really phenomenal in that it has the crop. And then, of course, this beautiful little miniature painting of the horse's head, really delightful. Another piece I mentioned, some of the garments in this section of the exhibit are grappling with what it means to be on transportation with other people. And this is an artwork that was created by Kathleen McDermott in 2014. It's called the Personal Space Dress. And it emerged as a sort of quippy, almost humorous response to the man-spreading that occurs on public transportation was the term that was going around quite a bit at the time. But I think that this dress has now an even more relevance to, or a different kind of relevance, obviously, to us amidst the pandemic when we literally do need personal space. And so this dress has built with sensors inside of it. So if someone comes too close, the skirt will actually expand to give the wearer more protective space. I'm going to pass it on to Joshua now, who's going to speak about the walking section.
Hi, my name is Joshua Johnson, and I will be talking a little bit about our section dedicated to all things walking. So on a basic level, we wear shoes to protect our feet. Outside of specific weather conditions, we do not think too much about the functionality. So this leaves a lot of room for creativity that can come in the form of futuristic and iconic styles from Nike and Jordan, or can manifest in a do-it-yourself style. If you can look on your left, the Adidas Superstars were colored by hand and the laces were actually replaced. And if you look closely on the right, the Converse have a Bob Marley sticker right on the toe. So this is just to show that sneakers allow us to express ourselves in a variety of different ways. And me personally, I like to use sneakers to experiment with different colors I wouldn't normally wear. This creativity is perfectly juxtaposed with the functionality of our Spartan Ensemble. We envision this ensemble for an athlete participating in an extreme sport like a Spartan or endurance race. I want to highlight the backpack, which is designed to hold the bare necessities, such as water, provided through a nozzle within the bag. Each item is meant to work together here in order to help the athlete complete the race or task as efficiently as possible.
So ice skates were historically made of bone and ivory and attached to the feet to help the body walk safely on a slippery ice. The cleats on the left are from the Anchorage Museum and would have been secured to the front end of a boot with a leather strap and worn by Alaska Native people to travel by foot across their ice territories. Today's ice cleats, like those on the right, are made of new material and enable people to do mountaineering, ice climbing, and walking in winter climates. And this shoe leveler, leg length discrepancy, or LLD, is a condition in which the paired lower limbs have an unequal length. Wearing a leaf in the shoe worn on the shorter leg can help reduce back pain and improve the ability to walk. The shoe leveler on display here has an adjustable height and works as a balancer and leveler to facilitate walking. Kat?
So also included in the walking section is the Soft Robotics Mechanotherapy leg wrap. This was lent to us by FSAD alumna Vanessa Sanchez, who is currently working the biodesign lab at Harvard University. The therapeutic compression device can treat conditions such as deep vein thrombosis and lymphedema. And what makes it so special, as you can see in the image on the right, is that it can be worn while the wearer is in motion, as it is soft and lightweight. It's not uncommon for compression devices to require the wearer to sit or lie down while receiving the therapy. So the ability to remain mobile provides a significant enhancement.
The next section of our exhibit is dedicated to rolling. And so we can think about bicyclers or wheelchair users, skaters, rollerbladers. They all propel themselves forward with wheels that turn over and over and over on an axis. And as with other bodily powered technology, rolling attachments to the body take many forms and of course have undergone numerous changes over time. And so here we can see a number of those different displays. Here we've got a skateboard that was designed in collaboration with Comet Skateboards by Professor Anil Netravalli. We have some contemporary quad rollers on the left, historical ones to the right, and then a late 19th century wheelchair that's on loan from the Yates County History Center. And so each of these attach to the body in different ways.
So this joyful roller skating jumpsuit is one of my favorite pieces in the exhibition. This was designed by Atlanta-based Taylor Fitwear, and the company's owner, Chesley Taylor, was incredibly generous in telling us about her story, why she started her business, and even sharing personal photos such as the one seen on the right. For conservation purposes, garments in fashion archives will never be worn again. So having this video that she shared of the three women skating, showing how beautifully the jumpsuits look and fit on moving human bodies, was a really exciting and welcome addition to the exhibition.
I want to make sure people were able to hear you, Kat, over the music. Would you mind just sharing that last bit once more?
There we go. I was saying that for conservation purposes, garments in fashion archives will not be worn again. So having this video that Chesley shared of the three women skating, showing how beautifully the jumpsuits look and fit on moving human bodies, was a really exciting and welcome addition to the exhibit.
Just doesn't want to stop playing. It's a wonderful video. All right, so the next case that we have is the flying case. And human beings have been fascinated with flight for a very long time. So whether it's jumping, skydiving, or sustained flight, there's a long-standing fascination. And so aerial ships emerge in the 18th century with demonstrations as early as 1709, and the first manned hot air balloon flight takes place in 1783. It's a long time ago for flight. So airship technologies developed with the discovery of hydrogen gas, and early, pre-1930s, long distance travel more commonly took place on rigid balloons like the Zeppelin, which of course was named for the inventor. And you can see here on the backside of this Art Deco pajama top. And glider technologies, of course, enabled the Wright brothers to successfully take flight in 1903 under sustained and controlled conditions. And by the mid-20th century, airplanes supplanted these rigid airships in commercial travel as well as military, delivery, and other kinds of flight services. And I want to point out on the right that this Zeppelin that you see, you also see all of these skyscrapers, Chrysler building, it appears to be, but the spire is actually an airship mooring. It was to moor airships. And so I think that's such an interesting representation of both the architecture, the ability to moor the Zeppelin, or the attempt to. So I'm going to turn it to Christine, who's going to talk about some other really interesting flight-related textiles.
So these are escape and evasion maps. Escape map scarves were one of the many innovative gadget inventions for the Allied forces in the Second World War, developed under the supervision of Christopher Clayton Hutton. These were known as escape and evasion maps and were created specifically for pilots who would be flying over enemy war zones. They are made of silk or rayon, and the scarf could be tied around the neck or concealed in a pocket, so that if the pilot needed to land, they would have a silent, tear and waterproof map of the territory. And this is a skydiving wingsuit. So this lightweight wingsuit is made of polyester and Velcro and was manufactured in Australia. Its design provides skydivers with detachable wings under the arms that allow the wearer to steer themselves through the air in a more controlled free fall. Typical free fall from 10,000 to 14,000 feet in the air can last from 30 seconds to 1 minute, and how one spends that time depends on the equipment and skills at hand. And I will take us into our last case in the human ecology building, and that is the carrying case. So transporting the body often means moving more than just a body in clothes, but a body that has to carry belongings with it. And the ability to carry more than one thing at a time, that is more than a handful or a mouthful, relies upon vessels that hold. In fashion, these vessels can take the form of garment pockets, bags and satchels, strips of cloth, luggage, and well-placed knots. So some of the highlights in this case, on the left, you see an Ursula Le Guin-inspired bag body vest based off of her carrier bag theory of fiction. In the middle, a motion discomfort bag on loan from the Kiel Center, and another piece on the right by Vanessa Sanchez that is a textile-based capacitive strain sensor. So this glove actually integrates 10 textile composite capacitive strain sensors at the fingers to track hand motion. And now I will pass it on to Leah Sweet to discuss Visualized in Transit.
Hi everyone, I'm Leah Sweet. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss Visualizing Transit, the installation at the Johnson Museum of Art that is part of the Fashion in Transit exhibition, as well as the processes that led up to it. So as Denise said earlier, when she approached me early in the fall of 2019 to speak about a potential collaboration for Fashion in Transit, or what would be Fashion in Transit, we had no idea how much circumstances would change around us in a pandemic that would, in opposition to the movement inherent in the show, keep people stationary and initially prohibit the circulation of people and objects within Cornell's spaces. And indeed, the Johnson Museum is currently only open to Cornell students, faculty, and staff this academic year. All of our permanent collection galleries are closed, and our temporary exhibition galleries now house a curricular exhibition and some small course-related installations. Visits are scheduled by appointment in order to keep a safe environment compliant with all public health safety practices. But we've done much to bring people together safely. And here I've poached a great image from the Fashion and Textile Collection's social media that shows Christine video conferencing with Mona during a scheduled visit to the museum to view potential works for Visualizing Transit. And for me, this image of two people discussing a wonderful quilt by Faith Ringgold is emblematic of how we have all been working together to maximize in-person presence with the help of technology over this past year, fostering connections not only between people and the museum's physical collections and exhibition spaces, but also, and even more importantly, connections between people through our collections and exhibition spaces. So despite the challenges that this academic year has presented, Visualizing Transit has achieved many of the objectives and outcomes that Denise and I identified in that initial conversation back in 2019. And this is partly because it's the product of a longer collaboration that unrolled slowly over the course of 2 semesters. During the fall, when the student curators and Denise were working with her seminar, Curating Fashion Exhibitions, we had a first run at an installation together with a show called Green Armor. The students worked with the museum's collections online and gridded floor plans of the Apatrony Gallery, which you see them standing in here. And the substantive cooperation began when we worked to translate their ideas into reality, both in the gallery and online. So, for example, the changes that can take place during the transition from a layout on paper to an exhibition on the walls is very difficult to grasp without being physically present. So we held an installation Zoom, I think the first of its kind for the Johnson, with me, 2 of our preparators, Denise, and the student curators. So we tried out their initial plan and ultimately settled on some alternate configurations it would look. And moreover, the student curators experienced how by collaborating not only would navigate copyright issues for the online version of the installation Visualizing Transit this semester, with the student curators and Denise able to view, select, and situate artworks for in-person and staff guidance. And though the Johnson is delighted to be able to continue training future curators, scholars, and other professionals, this has been a two-way relationship. The students have learned about curating in an art museum, but they have also brought their knowledge and the perspectives of other disciplines to the museum as well. Student research for the installation Green Armor helped identify the sitter of a large painted portrait that recently came to the museum from elsewhere on campus. Visualizing Transit is currently on view to anyone visiting the curricular galleries this semester, including students from other Cornell classes, and quite a few BFA and MFA students who are displaying their work at the museum for the first time. Yet I think the potential of this can be best understood in the fact that Visualizing Transit has also been a focal point for a large undergrad fashion lecture course, Fashion, Aesthetics, and Society. They heard from the student curators in detail about the exhibition and now have the opportunity to see and learn from the exhibition at the museum. This model of advanced undergrad and graduate students working with the Johnson's collections to teach more intro-level students in the same or related disciplines is something that has great potential. And I'm certain that our present mode of collaboration will continue to develop in the future, especially when we are all back on campus and the museum is fully open to the public. So now we'll hear from Christine and Joshua about this exhibition itself.
So what does it mean visually, aesthetically, artistically, to be a body in motion across time and space? While our fashion exhibit in the Human Ecology building considers the ways in which fashion enables different kinds of bodily movement, like sledding, swimming, walking, riding, rolling, flying, and carrying, the gaps left in the wake of verb categorization have stream beds and artistic interpretations, which we explore here. So we consider dance, directorial photographic scholarship, line and intuitive drawing, transitory feminist typologies, and stitched soaring narratives. We have arranged the artworks to relate to one another, both spatially and conceptually. The large wall features one of Ana Mendietta's silhouette photographs next to Faith Ringgold's quilt titled 7 Passages to a Flight. We see this relationship as a diptych locating both air and land and impressions the body makes on both, physically and poetically. So Ringgold's quilt is built up through hand painting and stitching a strip of story squares, showing the body taking off and up through a pictorial landscape. And Mendietta's piece represents the intentional digging and scraping away of earth in the form of a feminine typology, vividly reminiscent of a human footprint as well, tying deeply into our curatorial interest of bodies on the move.
So another wall features work by photographers Pablo Monasterio and Jerome Liebling, and another piece, this time a print by Ringgold. This grouping is based around Liebling's photograph of the young boy in front of the car. The boy is stuck in a pose while his picture is being taken. The state of being stuck is amplified by his worn out shoes and the broken car window. We have positioned the other two works above him, not only because of their elevation, but they also represent the young boy's aspirations of transcending past earthly bounds. In the spirit of transcending earthly bounds, I want to highlight an excerpt from a poem by the scholar and artist Eve Ewing. The poem is titled Montage in a Car and comes from her book, Electric Arches. I'm 11 and we are going to a neighborhood where I've never been to stay with a woman I've never met because we cannot go home anymore. All of my books and stuffed animals are in a box beside me. I am hot. I think this poem does a great job of emphasizing how the boy is stuck in his environment, especially in relation to the Ringgold and Monasterio pieces.
So next, we have a wall featuring works by Margaret Burke-White, Paul Klee, and Kusakabe Kimbei. Starting from the left with a portrait of the photographer Burke-White in flight, moving to one of her groundbreaking photographic works at the top of the right stack, which depicts USSR ballet dancers in a dynamic performance. The dancers appear as though they are linked in a flying pattern, but are in fact lying on the floor. The added bonus of having these two wonderful Burke-White pieces is that she was a rather well-traveled female photographer, being the first to be invited to the USSR to photograph life there, a time when it was still contentious to travel as a professional woman. And beneath this is the effervescent Paul Klee piece illustrating a questioning cubist runner and an animal floating in the pictorial field. Finally, the grounding force of this grouping is 3 jinrikisha drivers with women riding by Kusakabe Kimbei, photographed near the end of the 19th century, depicting how bodies themselves have been and can be used with a combination of design engineering as a force behind transportation. These jinrikisha are better known today as rickshaws.
And so we've come to the end of our exhibition tour here. This is the complete gallery in the Johnson Museum. Before we move on to Q&A, I would just like to say a big thank you to many, many, many people who have made this possible. As I teach in my Curating Fashion Exhibitions class, there is never a sole author of an exhibition. It is a collaborative effort that brings together many minds, many skills, strengths, and a willingness to trust and be part of this process. And so there were many, many entities, institutions, individuals who supported us. And we'd especially like to thank the Cornell Council for the Arts for supporting this exhibition, allowing us to continue with our work amidst the pandemic, to trust in us to do this safely, which we did. And we're so pleased to be able to share it with all of you virtually today. And so I'd like to take these last few minutes here. We can spend answering any questions that the audience might have. So you're welcome to drop your questions into the chat. I'll go back to our Q&A slide. And so if anyone has any thoughts, questions, comments, I know our student curators have already talked about some of their favorite pieces in the exhibition, but I'm wondering maybe to get the conversation started, if each of the students would like to say a favorite piece that either didn't make the cut for the exhibition or a piece that we didn't get a chance to talk about today. So I will hand it over to whomever would like to go first.
I can start. We didn't talk about this piece, but this piece was actually introduced to, I think, most of us last semester in the Curating Fashion Exhibitions. It was brought up by another curation team who is working with swimwear, and one of my favorite pieces that is in the exhibition but we didn't talk about today is the Tomboy X swimsuit, and it's a really amazingly designed swimwear. It is gender neutral, gender non-conforming, and so anyone of any body can wear it, and it's also size inclusive, and it's really well made. I'm actually planning on buying one, so.
Shall I call on someone? I can talk about some of the pieces that I had sort of imagined for the exhibition that didn't make it, and that's a very large collection that we have in our fashion collection of motoring dusters. Motoring dusters, typically linen, but other textiles as well, and worn over the body because early car travel was pretty dusty. The cars of today are obviously much different and closed. And of course, our roads are different as well. And so with many more dirt roads and open vehicles, motoring dusters were a way of protecting the undergarments and enabled this kind of travel. So that was another favorite piece of mine in the exhibition. I don't know if anyone else would like to share, or if we have any questions from the audience, we'd be happy to take those.
I can
Oh, someone does have a question, but go ahead, Josh. You'll go first, and then I'll follow up with the question.
Okay, I was just gonna say, I think my favorite piece, going back to sneakers, is the pair of Air Jordan 1s that we have that seem to be dated in the mid 1980s. And one thing that we were struggling with our research was trying to figure out if this was a real pair or a counterfeit. But I think it talks about this interesting, I guess, phenomenon in fashion of reproductions. And so even if you don't have an original copy, there are usually a lot of counterfeit and a lot of replicas floating out there. And so having that piece and thinking about that history was really interesting for me.
And I'll convey the question that we have from Jane, which is a question, are the shoe levelers available? And the answer to that is yes, they are. We actually acquired that shoe leveler for the exhibition because Mona, and maybe Mona can speak to that a little bit more. And then we also have a question from Justin, and I believe this is for Leah. Is the Johnson Museum, and I think for everyone, is the campus open right now? And I think the answer to that is, unfortunately, the visitor policy, which is in effect until May 15th, at which point I think it will be reevaluated, but I think that's the date right now, that campus is closed to visitors, unfortunately. But maybe Leah can share a little bit about if the Johnson has any plans to what their future looking plans might be. So I'll let Leah answer that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are only open to Cornell affiliated people at the moment, but we do have plans to, fingers crossed and everything permitting, reopen in the fall. We do have exhibitions planned for fall as well. Check our website. I won't go into them right now, but check our website, and hopefully we'll be able to see you come September.
And I'll also note that at the Cornell Fashion and Textile Collection, we are also typically open to the public. Our buildings are usually open to the public, but of course are closed now during the pandemic. But we're all hopeful to be able to open our campus again. And I'll say that for the Cornell Fashion and Textile Collection, we have a few very exciting exhibits coming up that will open. One in May is called Clothing Amidst Conflict, Women's Wear During World War II. That exhibition is going to be curated by Audrey Perlman. We also have an exhibit called The Prep, which is about preppy style, curated by Sophie Wang. And these are two senior undergraduates in fiber science and apparel design that will be curating exhibits that will be up through the summer. And the World War II exhibition will actually stay up for the first few weeks of the fall semester so that the new students on campus will have a chance to see it. And then we're also collaborating again with the Wharton Studio Museum to curate a small exhibition that will be at the History Center in Tompkins County. It will open July 2, and it's a mini exhibit called Serial Style, The Business of Being Irene Castle. She was a silent film star who lived in Ithaca, and that mini exhibit that we're doing with the Wharton Studio Museum is part of a larger exhibit at the History Center in Tompkins County called Breaking Barriers, Women's Lives and Livelihoods in Tompkins County. So we're really excited to be able to bring that exhibition to the wider public in downtown Ithaca at the History Center starting in July. And then we do hope campus will be open to visitors again so we can welcome you to see our World War II exhibition. But in the meantime, the pandemic has really challenged us to do digital. And so we've been creating digital websites for each of our exhibitions. We have a question from Renee asking to repeat the name of the swimsuit. And I think that Renee may be referring to the Tomboy X. And that's tomboy, as you would expect to spell it, and then just an X at the end. And it's called the unisuit. And so it's a unisex, unigender, gender non-conforming swimsuit. And I believe that might be, you can clarify, Renee, if that's not the swimsuit that you were referring to. And then we have a question from John, a really interesting question. Is the trade-off between utility and aesthetics changing? And I might open that up to the students, and I will just say myself that, this last year and the utility and the functionality of, say, for example, a mask that we're all wearing in public spaces, we can see how masks have become fashion statements, but we also see them as utility. And so that sort of like trade-off, right? At what point does a shoe actually become disabling, right? So we talk about shoes as enabling movement, but sometimes they disable movement. And so that trade-off, it's a really interesting question, like at what is that line? And I think that's sort of individual, it's also cultural, but I'll also let some of the student curators weigh in on that question. If that trade-off between utility and aesthetics is changing. Any other thoughts?
I think that's a really great point, and specifically thinking about the Spartan Ensemble, for an athlete who's trying to complete a race, you want to carry as little as possible. You just want the bare necessities. So at what point in styling your bag is it going to be too costly? Or at what point in bringing an extra pair of socks, or your favorite socks, or your lucky socks, whatever that may be, kind of where is that trade-off? And I think for something like that, there's a little bit of wiggle room, and you still have the freedom of, choosing a specific color backpack, or maybe choosing a different color pair of shorts, or whatnot, but still trying to remain that utility and functionality as best as possible.
I'll also say, I think that because of the pandemic, loungewear and elevated loungewear is something I've been seeing a lot of and a lot more of. So, typically I think sweatpants were sweatpants before, but now they are like really high-end sweatpants. And, so you can still achieve, even if you can't leave your home, you can still dress up in a way or feel elevated in a way, even in sort of comfort clothes. That's something that I've been interested in, but and I think there are some trade-offs there, but that's something interesting I think that has come about in the world anyway.
I think during the pandemic, I've probably been thinking a little too much about functionality. And one thing I really connected with in this exhibition was I was so drawn to the figure skating costume and the roller skating jumpsuit, and just seeing that in the way they're designed and in the colors that were chosen. It's about joy and moving with joy. So even though the function is still there for both of those costumes, I think it's a great example of having both and not really having to compromise. So hopefully more of that going forward.
I think that might be a really nice point to end on, which is this idea of the way fashion can bring us joy. And in this exhibition, we think about the joy that comes with travel, with movement, with being able to, whether it's skydive or roller skate or ice skate on BB Lake or slide on skis, walk, roll, all of these different ways. It is about joy, and how can our fashion enhance joy and be enabling and be inclusive. This is our goal, and so I think that might be a really nice note to end on. And I want to thank again everyone who took the time out of their day to come and to celebrate the work of these 4 phenomenal students. I must say it is no small feat to create something physical during this time, and to do this for the community, because it was really important to us. Our display cases are in the hallway of the Human Ecology building, and while we don't have as many people and our buildings are locked and only our students and staff and faculty are here inside, it's really important to us in our community to bring joy. And we hope that our exhibits not only bring joy, but also critical thinking and education. And so I really want to commend the students for putting in the effort to make this possible in a really challenging time. And this has been a many years project. So I also want to thank Leah and Rick for trusting me and jumping on board with this idea. It's so wonderful to work with the Herbert F. Johnson Museum of Art. I'm so excited about future collaborations with them and beyond. And so we hope that you'll follow us on our social media, stay in touch, come see our exhibitions, and we'll keep you updated with all of our future events. And we also want to thank the eCornell staff for doing such a phenomenal job in putting this together for us and enabling us to share this exhibition widely with all of you. So thank you to everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful day as you move through the world in your fashioned bodies. Thank you.